In 1922, a Romanov tiara appeared in a London catalogue. It sold for pennies. The dealer smashed it for parts the same week. This wasn't theft, it was official Soviet policy, and the people who profited weren't revolutionaries or criminals. They were businessmen, bureaucrats, and jewelers whose names you've never heard, executing one of history's quietest and most cynical liquidations. When the Bolsheviks seized the Winter Palace in 1917, they inherited 3 centuries of accumulated imperial jewellery: diamonds, emeralds, sapphires, pearls, entire rooms of it. But the new government didn't want crowns. They wanted cash to fund industrialisation, and they wanted it fast. So between 1920 and 1938, the Soviet states systematically sold off the Romanov collection through a network of dealers, middlemen, and front companies operating across Europe and America. The jewels didn't go to museums, they went to whoever showed up with money and knew how to keep quiet. And what happened next erased most of the collection from history. Before the official sales even began, members of the Bolshevik inner circle were already helping themselves. In the chaos of 1918 and 1919, party officials tasked with inventorying the imperial treasury simply pocketed smaller pieces, rings, brooches, loose gemstones, and walked out. There was no organised theft, just opportunistic pilfering dressed up as administrative confusion. Entire trays of jewellery went missing during the inventory process, and the few bureaucrats who noticed didn't have the authority or the desire to stop it. Soviet officials publicly condemned the Romanovs as decadent parasites, while privately sliding their diamonds into coat pockets. Some of these pieces resurfaced decades later in European estate sales, quietly sold by the children of revolutionary officials who swore they despised everything the imperial family represented. One documented case involved a Romanov emerald brooch appearing in a 1960s Paris auction, consigned by the grandson of a minor Bolshevik administrator who claimed his grandfather received it as compensation for government work. By the mid-1930s, high-ranking party members were purchasing Romanov jewellery through official state channels as gifts for wives and mistresses. This was technically legal, state property sold at state-determined prices, but it meant that the same officials overseeing propaganda campaigns about imperial oppression were dressing their families in the spoils. These pieces stayed hidden in Soviet private collections for generations, and some are still there, owned by descendants who know exactly where they came from and have no intention of admitting it. That was the moment I stopped thinking of this as just history. They didn't just destroy the Romanovs, they wore them. The people who destroyed the Romanovs profited first, but they weren't the only ones. The next wave of buyers weren't stealing, they were erasing. Norman Weiss was an American gem dealer based in New York who specialised in distressed assets from collapsing European aristocracies. Between 1920 and 1923, Weiss purchased several lots of loose gemstones and smaller jewellery pieces directly from Soviet trade representatives in London and Paris. He paid a fraction of their value, then had them recut and reset into Art Deco designs to sell to American socialites who had no idea they were wearing stones that once belonged to Russian empresses. Weiss treated Romanov emeralds the same way he treated Brazilian tourmalines, just inventory. He had original Russian settings broken down because American buyers found them too heavy and old-fashioned. That stunned me. A Romanov tiara one year, a party stone in Manhattan the next. Completely erased. This means someone in New York or Los Angeles right now might be wearing a stone from a Romanov tiara with no idea because Weiss erased its history to make it sell faster. But Weiss was an amateur compared to Jacques Zolotas, a Belgian diamond dealer so obscure that even specialised historians struggle to find records of him. Zolotas operated out of Antwerp and Brussels, buying Romanov gemstones from Soviet agents and immediately having them recut to remove any identifying features. He would take a documented sapphire with a provenance going back 200 years, recut it to a slightly different shape, and sell it as a newly sourced stone from Ceylon or Burma. This practice is called laundering in the gem trade, and it's exactly as shady as it sounds. Zolotus processed hundreds of carats of Romanov gemstones this way, effectively making them untraceable. Those stones are almost certainly in circulation today, set in modern jewellery, with no one aware of their origin. It's cultural vandalism disguised as business pragmatism, and it worked because gemstones don't carry serial numbers. The launderers made provenance disappear. The next group made it respectable. Emmanuel Snowman ran the London branch of Wartski, a prestigious jewellery firm that still exists today. Between 1925 and 1933, Snowman brokered some of the largest Romanov jewellery purchases on record, acting as a middleman between the Soviet government and wealthy private buyers across Europe and America. His genius was discretion. He never advertised where the jewels came from. He simply presented them as fine antique pieces and let buyers draw their own conclusions. Snowman purchased entire suites of jewellery, matching necklaces, earrings, bracelets, tiaras, and then broke them apart to sell individually. A complete parure was too expensive and too conspicuous for most buyers, but a single necklace from that set could move quickly if priced right. This strategy maximised profit, but destroyed historical integrity. Sets worn together by generations of Romanov women were scattered across different continents, never to be reunited. When I first saw Snowman's inventory logs, I couldn't believe how clinical the operation was. He kept a meticulous record showing exactly which pieces he dismantled and where each component went. He wasn't preserving history, he was dismantling it one bracelet at a time, and he made a fortune doing it. In Paris, Henri Boucheron followed a similar model. Boucheron was a member of the famous jewellery dynasty, and in 1928 he purchased a significant collection of Romanov pieces, including several items that had belonged to Empress Alexandra herself. But Boucheron didn't buy for resale. He kept the pieces in his private vault and rarely showed them to anyone. After his death in 1954, his heirs sold the collection at auction without any catalogue description mentioning the provenance. The auction house listed them as antique Russian jewellery, circa 1900, and they went to anonymous bidders who have never been identified. Items worn by the last Empress of Russia are now somewhere in the world, owned by someone who may not even know what they have. This kind of willful ignorance is almost worse than intentional erasure. These respectable firms gave Soviet sales a veneer of legitimacy, but the most aggressive buyer didn't need respectability. Armand Hammer was an American industrialist who most people associate with oil and Soviet trade deals, not jewellery. But between 1929 and 1933, Hammer was one of the largest buyers of Romanov artefacts, including jewellery, Fabergé eggs, and imperial regalia. Hammer had direct access to Soviet officials because of his business dealings, and he used that access to purchase items at rock-bottom prices during Stalin's forced industrialization push, when the government was desperately liquidating assets to fund factory construction. Hammer didn't buy the jewels because he loved them. He bought them because he knew he could flip them to American museums and collectors at a massive markup. He treated the Romanov collection like a commodity futures market, moving items through shell companies and private sales that left almost no paper trail. Some of the pieces he purchased were so significant, their sale would have caused an international scandal if anyone had known at the time. What comes next still makes me angry. Hammer later styled himself as a great patron of the arts and a friend of Russian culture. He donated some of the less valuable pieces to museums and took credit for preserving Romanov heritage, conveniently omitting that he had sold off the most valuable items to private buyers who locked them away in bank vaults where no one would ever see them again. Hammer also had a silent partner, the European Gem Syndicate, a front company registered in Switzerland in 1931. The company existed for less than 3 years, purchased an estimated $2 million worth of Romanov jewellery, and then dissolved without a trace. No one knows who was behind it. The registration listed a Geneva attorney as the sole officer, but that attorney refused to disclose his clients, citing Swiss banking secrecy laws. The syndicate operated with precision: specific pieces, cash payments, private viewings, untraceable shipping addresses. When it dissolved in 1934, its assets were quietly distributed to shareholders, and those pieces have been in private hands ever since. Some appeared at auction decades later with vague provenances like European Private Collection, acquired 1930s, which is dealer code for "we know where this came from, but we're not saying." Hammer and his syndicate partners understood that opacity equals profit, but not everyone needed to hide. There was one exception to the pattern of erasure and anonymity. In 1932, British aristocrat Lady Zia Werner purchased a suite of Romanov jewellery directly from the Soviet government through official channels. Unlike the dealers and front companies, Werner bought openly, paid full market price, and kept meticulous records. She was married to Sir Harold Werner, a South African mining magnate, and had a personal passion for imperial Russian culture. Here's what's strange: Werner actually wore the pieces. She appeared at events in London and Paris dressed in Romanov jewels and made no secret of where they came from. Society columns from the 1930s describe her as dripping in Russian imperial splendour, and some contemporaries found it tasteless, given that the Romanov family had been executed less than 15 years earlier. But Werner didn't care. She believed she was preserving the pieces by keeping them in use. After her death, the Werner collection was kept mostly intact and eventually donated to museums, which means some of the pieces she bought are now on public display. This makes her one of the few buyers whose purchases didn't result in jewellery vanishing into private vaults forever. But even this relatively noble outcome doesn't change the fact that she was buying jewellery from a government that had murdered its original owners. Werner was the exception. What happened to most of the remaining pieces was far worse. By the mid-1930s, the Soviet government had sold off most of the high-value Romanov jewellery, but they still had hundreds of smaller pieces left. Minor brooches, simple rings, everyday items that weren't worth a major international sale. So they dumped them into the general European antique market with almost no documentation. These pieces were bought by small-time dealers, pawn shops, and ordinary collectors who had no idea what they were purchasing. Romanov jewellery showed up in London flea markets in the 1940s, priced at a few pounds because sellers didn't recognise the imperial hallmarks. Some pieces were melted down for gold content. Others were sold as costume jewellery. A few were recognised by sharp-eyed collectors, but most disappeared into the vast anonymous churn of the second-hand market. This is perhaps the saddest fate of all. Jewellery once worn by empresses ended up in junk bins and estate sales, valued only for scrap weight. Not a dramatic heist or cunning resale, but slow, banal erasure through sheer neglect. It's the ultimate indignity, and it happened to hundreds of pieces. And even now, some are still out there, waiting to be rediscovered in attics and storage units across Europe. The Romanov jewels didn't end up in museums or rival monarchies. They were scattered by a network of dealers, bureaucrats, and opportunists whose names have been almost entirely forgotten. Soviet officials pocketing rings during inventory chaos. American gem dealers erasing provenance through strategic recutting. Prestigious European jewellers dismantling parures for individual sale. An industrialist flipping imperial treasure like commodity futures. And finally, the slow meltdown of remaining pieces into the anonymous second-hand market. These weren't dramatic heists. They were methodical, cynical, and effective. The people who bought the Romanov jewels didn't preserve history. They erased it, piece by piece, transaction by transaction, until the collection that once symbolized Russian imperial power became scattered gemstones in anonymous vaults and pawn shops. The jewels are still out there. Some are in museums, some are in private collections, some are in second-hand shops waiting to be recognized, and some have been destroyed entirely, gold melted, gemstones recut beyond recognition. What happened wasn't a mystery. It was a documented liquidation executed by people who understood that provenance is only valuable if someone bothers to preserve it. And almost no one did.